Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the February 18th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: Warner Brothers Discovery said it would restart deal talks with Paramount, setting the stage for a potential bidding war with its preferred suitor, Netflix. Tech stocks interrupted their recent slide, helping to lift the S&P 500, Dow, and Nasdaq, all by 0.1%. Eric Trump is investing in Israeli drone maker Extend, a company that has a multi-million-dollar contract with the Defense Department his father oversees. Genuine Parts, the big owner of Napa Auto Care Centers, said it plans to separate its auto and industrial parts units to create two distinctive public companies. ByteDance has developed an AI model that can turn a single text prompt into a high-quality video with a storyline, scene changes, and distinctive characters. Infosys agreed to work with Anthropic to develop and deliver artificial intelligence services to businesses in complex regulated industries. An appeals court rejected Kelsey's emergency bid to halt Nevada's push to block the prediction market platform from offering contracts on sports and other events in the state. Danaher struck a deal to acquire California-based medical device maker Masimo for almost $10 billion, the companies said. At Buffalo Wild Wings, a boneless chicken wing doesn't need to come from a wing, a judge ruled, saying that a suit claiming deceptive wording had no meat on its bones. Medtropic said profit fell on its fiscal third quarter as costs rose and the company invested more money into the business, offsetting higher revenue. The EU opened an investigation into Shein, citing concerns about illegal products sold online and potential risks to users from the platform's design. Now for the key articles under the Worldwide section. Vice President J.D. Vance said Iran had failed to acknowledge core U.S. demands in Geneva, after which Washington said it had agreed to give Tehran 2 weeks to close the gaps between the sides. The U.S. presented new seismic data to buttress its recent allegation that China has secretly carried out low-yield nuclear tests in violation of an international accord banning all nuclear detonations. The U.S. plans to deploy more advanced missile systems and other weapons in the Philippines to deter Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. Japan plans to invest about $36 billion in the U.S. as part of a $550 billion strategic trade and investment agreement. Stephen Colbert lashed out at the FCC and his own network on air after CBS scrapped an interview he had planned with a Texas politician. India seized 3 tankers that are under U.S. sanctions that it says were involved in illicit ship-to-ship transfers off its western coast. Peru's Congress voted to oust President Jose Geri, extending years of political upheaval in one of the most important exporters of essential minerals. An immigration judge dropped the Trump administration's case against Columbia University protester Mohsen Madai, his lawyers said. Died Jesse Jackson, 84, civil rights activist. The picture on today's front page takes place in New Orleans, as a picture shows a large building very well decorated in the background as a float is going down the street and people on the sidelines are dressed in many colorful outfits. And that caption reads, "Revel with a Cause." Mardi Gras celebrants splash their colors in the city's Jackson Square on Fat Tuesday, the end of the weeks-long carnival season. Today marks Ash Wednesday, the Christian period of sacrifice ahead of Easter. And that headline reads, New Orleans enjoys a last bash before Lent. Articles from the front page follow. Jackson, civil rights activist who sought presidency, dies. Minister's 1984 run made him the first black man to wage a full White House bid. By Cameron McWhirter. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, a longtime civil rights activist and Democratic political leader, has died. He was 84. A gifted public speaker, Jackson was known for fiery rhetoric, often advocating for the interest of working people, especially minorities. In a famous speech at the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta in 1988, he urged different U.S. groups, black and white people, liberals and conservatives, to seek common ground. Progress will not come through boundless liberalism nor static conservatism, he said, but at the critical mass of mutual survival. It takes 2 wings to fly. Jackson, whose death was confirmed by a family spokeswoman, sought the 1984 Democratic nomination for president, becoming the first black man to wage a nationwide campaign for a major party's endorsement. He returned to the trail in 1988 and scored a big win in Michigan, a victory that briefly catapulted him into front-runner status. Jackson was a favorite among many liberals who saw him as a strong defender of the disenfranchised, and was disliked by many conservatives and some commentators and politicians who viewed him as a self-promoter who exaggerated his relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Jesse Louis Burns was born October 8, 1941, in Greenville, South Carolina. His mother was Helen Burns, then 16 years old, and his biological father was Noah Lewis Robinson, a 33-year-old married neighbor. About a year after Jesse was born, his mother married Charles Jackson, a postal worker who adopted the boy. Jackson grew up in the segregated South and attended an all-black high school in Greenville. In 1959, he attended the University of Illinois on a football scholarship before he transferred to North Carolina A&T State University, a historically black institution. In 1960, he and 7 other black people held a sit-in at the public library, which allowed only white people. Police arrested the group, thereafter known as the Greenville Eight, and charged them with disorderly conduct. Jackson participated in marches in Alabama, and King later tapped him as a leader of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's efforts in Chicago. After graduating from college in 1964, Jackson studied at the Chicago Theological Seminary, but dropped out to work full-time for King. He was at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis on April 4, 1968, when an assassin killed King. Jackson, who was ordained a minister in June 1968, clashed with the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, one of King's colleagues, and then SCLC chairman, about the group's direction and who would lead the organization. In 1971, Jackson and supporters left to form the Chicago-based Operation Push, which organized boycotts of businesses it stated weren't doing enough to help minorities. He ran for president again in 1988. With better organization and financing, he won even more party contests, including in Michigan, Virginia, and Georgia. Jackson remained active in Democratic politics, supporting former President Bill Clinton and others. He went on several overseas missions in the 1980s and the 1990s to negotiate releases of Americans being held in various countries, including Syria, Iraq, and Cuba. In 2001, Jackson announced he had an extramarital affair with a staffer and fathered a daughter. Jesse Jackson said in 2017 that he had Parkinson's disease and that he planned to remain active. In 2023, he resigned as president of the Rainbow Push Coalition. His degenerative disorder was eventually diagnosed not as Parkinson's, but progressive supranuclear palsy. Warner, in shift, reopens talks with Paramount. After sweetened bid, board sets deadline for best and final offer. By Joe Flint. Warner Brothers Discovery said Tuesday it will restart deal talks with Paramount, setting the stage for a potential bidding war with its preferred suitor, Netflix. The move comes after Paramount last week sweetened its all-cash $77.9 billion hostile offer for all of Warner Discovery, including its cable channels, CNN, and TNT. Warner said Paramount has indicated it would be willing to up its offer to $31 per Warner share from $30 if Warner would agree to engage in negotiations. The price increase wasn't part of Paramount's latest amended tender offer for the company. Warner's willingness to engage with Paramount is the latest stakes-raising plot twist in a months-long takeover battle for the home of some of the entertainment industry's most important properties and brands, including HBO, Superman, and Harry Potter. Netflix has an agreement in place to acquire Warner's movie and TV studios and HBO Max streaming service in an all-cash deal, which is valued at $72 billion. Netflix has the right to match any offer Warner accepts from another bidder. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Epstein Scandal Rattles Britain's Royal Family by Max Colchester and Margot Patrick, London. Prince Andrew, Duke of York, was preparing to board a flight to London in September 2010 when Jeffrey Epstein emailed asking to alter the pair's plans for a quiet dinner in Buckingham Palace. The U.S. financier, convicted in 2008 of soliciting a minor for prostitution, said he was accompanied by 3 women, including a Russian model. "Should I bring them all so as to add some life?" he wrote. Andrew agreed. Later that afternoon, Epstein wrote back to add one more guest, who he described as Romanian, very cute. The next day, Epstein wrote, "Great fun, more later." Andrew replied, "Yes, please." The get-together at the seat of the British royal family came just over a year after Epstein finished serving a 13-month-long sentence for his crime. It was one of several new revelations in a cache of emails and text, many featuring erratic capitalizations and punctuation, published by the Justice Department recently, that have shed light on the extent of the relationship between Epstein and the younger brother of Britain's King Charles III. The disclosures threaten to tarnish the image of the monarchy. The newly disclosed documents show that Epstein, in the years after he got out of jail, helped the prince and his indebted ex-wife Sarah Ferguson manage their finances and scout new business. In return, Epstein used his regal connections to impress business contacts as well as young women. Health CEO made industry side bets. United Health Stephen Hemsley took unannounced stakes in startups. By Mark Maremount and Anna Wild Matthews. Stephen Hemsley, leader of giant United Health Group, for years has made private investments in healthcare startups, including firms that do business with or compete against United Health. The investments, involving tens of millions of dollars and stretching back at least 7 years, weren't announced by the healthcare companies that he was investing in, and United Health never told its shareholders about them. Hemsley, 73, has been a dominant force at United Health for the past 2 decades. He began his second stint as chief executive last May, returning to help stabilize the finances of the behemoth he helped build. He previously served for more than a decade as CEO, then as chairman since 2017. In 2019, while he was United Health Board chairman, Hemsley founded an investment firm, Cloverfields Capital Group LP, which is registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission as an investment advisor. Cloverfields, which he still owns, has said in filings that it invests in publicly held companies such as elevator maker Otis worldwide. But Cloverfields has a less visible side, the Wall Street Journal found. Cloverfield's capital and entities affiliated with it have bought stakes in privately held healthcare startups. The investment targets spanned a range of healthcare interest, from a vaccine administration firm that did business with United Health to a provider of digital health services that offers a product that competes with it. The private investments involving United Health's chief create the potential for conflicts of interest, ethics specialists said. This very long article then continues the issue of Hemsley having a conflict of interest. It continues, directors of companies registered in Delaware as United Health is have a duty of loyalty, an obligation to put the company's interest ahead of their own. A director who invests personally in a startup in the same industry without first clearing it with his company could be breaching that duty, legal experts say. U.S. oil output is strong despite very low prices, by Benoit Morin, Midland County, Texas. Perched in the control room of a Chevron rig, an operator steered a drilling bit thousands of feet under the arid surface of the Permian Basin. As he did so, he received real-time directions from a specialist in Houston, some 477 miles away. Remote monitoring and other feats of technology that have become mainstream are among the clues that help explain why U.S. oil production has, thus far, defied predictions that it would decline in conjunction with the lowest crude prices since the pandemic. As U.S. oil prices dropped below $60 a barrel in recent months, the industry shed rigs by the dozens and laid off crews that frack wells. Yet the country's wells last year gushed a record 13.6 million barrels of crude on average each day, 100,000 barrels more than the Energy Information Administration, the federal forecaster, had anticipated before President Trump's inauguration. The disconnect between slackening activity and the increasing yield has mystified even oil chieftains. Executives credit the outperformance in part to companies' engineering prowess and the changing makeup of the industry. Oil giants now have a bigger share of crude production in their hands and are largely impervious to price swings, ensuring a steady output. Among other field enhancements, these companies now routinely drill wells that extend over 4 miles and allow them to collect more crude at a lower cost. No views, no hikes, just Z's. Travelers, tired of being tired, book Sleepcations, by Natasha Dangor. Caitlin Rosati's latest getaway featured none of her usual hallmarks of adventure. There were no pre-dawn hikes or multi-city tours. Her itinerary involved one activity only: sleep. Rosati slept for 16 hours on the first night of her stay at a hotel in Saratoga Springs, New York last year. When she woke up in the early hours of the afternoon, she had breakfast, took a bath, then headed straight back to bed for a 4-hour nap. "I'm hooked. This is awesome," she said after the first night of her stay. By the second day, Rosati didn't bother leaving her bed at all. A growing cohort of Gen Zs and millennial travelers are choosing REM-fueled trips they've dubbed the sleepcation. For them, the ultimate vacation luxury isn't a nice view, it's a mattress. Norway just keeps piling up gold medals. By Ben Cohen and Joshua Robinson. Milan. Every 4 years, Americans tune into the Winter Olympics and ask themselves a few questions. What is a quadruple Lutz? Who would ever monobob? Why is curling so addictive? And how does Norway, a country with the population of Minnesota, dominate the entire world? In each of the past 3 Olympics, this traveling band of Vikings ruled the gold medal standings and the overall medal table. Now they're riding roughshod over the Milan Cortina Games. With a dozen golds through Monday's events, the Norwegians were sitting on more than twice as many as the U.S., with less than 2% of the people. Not that anyone is remotely surprised. The most successful nation at the Winter Olympics already has the most gold, silver, bronze, and total medals of all time. Over the past decade, Norway has cemented its complete and utter ownership of this event. Now for other articles within the paper. Berkshire sells Bank of America, Apple. By Crystal Herr. Berkshire Hathaway sold shares in the Bank of America and Apple and added a new position in the New York Times during Warren Buffett's last few months as chief executive. The Omaha, Nebraska company disclosed its stock holdings in a regulatory filing Tuesday afternoon. Berkshire shed about 50.8 million shares of Bank of America during the December quarter. The conglomerate also sold 10.3 million shares of Apple, marking the third straight period it reduced its stake in the iPhone maker. The company purchased 5.1 million shares of the New York Times. The media company, which has expanded beyond its core news operation to games, recipes, and other digital offerings, rose 2.7% in after-hours trading. Berkshire, which has had a history in media stocks, sold its newspapers to publisher Lee Enterprises for $140 million in 2020. Shareholders at the time viewed it as a sign that Buffett viewed his newspaper business, which included publications such as the Buffalo News, Tulsa World in Oklahoma, and Richmond Times-Dispatch in Virginia, as unsustainable. Berkshire left unchanged its holdings in Kraft Heinz. American Express, Apple, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, and Chevron have been Berkshire's largest U.S. stock holdings. News Corp, owner of the Journal, has a commercial agreement to supply news through Apple services. India seizes shadow tankers amid trade thaw with U.S. By Shan Lee and Benoit Falcon. India's Coast Guard has seized 3 tankers under U.S. sanctions, which it says were involved in illicit ship-to-ship transfers off its western coast. Some analysts said the move marks New Delhi's first direct support of U.S. efforts to crack down on the so-called dark fleet. The vessels were intercepted on February 6th, about 100 nautical miles northwest of Mumbai, and were part of an international oil smuggling racket, the Coast Guard said in an Instagram post. The tankers are now anchored off Mumbai and under investigation, a spokesman said on Tuesday. Vance says Iran has 2 weeks on talks. Vice President says Tehran has fallen short of U.S. demands on nuclear program, by Lawrence Norman and Benoit Falcon. Vice President J.D. Vance said Iran had failed to acknowledge core U.S. demands in talks in Geneva on Tuesday, after which Washington said it had agreed to give Tehran 2 weeks to close the gaps between the sides. Vance said it was clear from his briefing that the talks that Iran hadn't yielded any breakthrough, adding that military action remained an option. The U.S. has demanded Iran end its enrichment of uranium, a central aspect of its nuclear work, which the White House fears gives Iran the capacity to build a nuclear weapon. President Trump has assembled a massive force just off Iran's coast. I don't think they want the consequences of not making a deal, he told reporters late Monday, saying that he would remain indirectly involved in Tuesday's talks, which ended after 3.5 hours of discussion. They want to make a deal. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei warned in a speech on Tuesday, ahead of the talks, that Iran was prepared to retaliate against an American strike. More dangerous than the American warship is the weapon that can send it to the bottom of the sea, he said. The U.S. may be struck so hard that it cannot get back up. Until Tuesday, much of the diplomacy had focused on talking about the scope of negotiations. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghi said Tuesday's talks were more substantive and that both sides in Geneva presented ideas aimed at crafting an agreement. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, Iran wants Trump to pull an Obama. The regime is safe when the U.S. focuses merely on its nuclear program. After Iran violently suppressed protest in 2009, President Obama sought to trade U.S. silence for nuclear negotiations. Now Tehran is hoping President Trump will make the same mistake. That was the logic of Tuesday's nuclear talks in Geneva. Though the military firepower that Mr. Trump has sent to the region leaves reason to wonder about his plans. The president promised to come to the aid of the Iranian people in January as they were massacred by their rulers at greater scale than ever before. This should be a moment to confront the true nature of the Iranian regime. Yet U.S. officials are again mired in discussions about nuclear enrichment, stockpiled uranium, and regional consortia. No wonder Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced good progress in Geneva, while cautioning that a deal may not come quickly. As ever with this regime, Mr. Araghchi said the parties reached a general understanding on a set of guiding principles. A U.S. official stressed to us the vagueness of that formulation. Vice President J.D. Vance said Tuesday that Mr. Trump has set some red lines that the Iranians are not yet willing to acknowledge. The Omani mediator cited progress, but merely toward identifying common goals and relevant technical issues. Another U.S. official said Iran promised detailed proposals in the next 2 weeks. Does Iran have 2 weeks to spare? Perhaps as a second U.S. aircraft carrier strike group heads to the region? But on Tuesday, Axios reported that the U.S. moved more than 50 F-35, F-22, and F-16 jet fighters to the region in the preceding 24 hours. Mr. Trump prizes flexibility, and he could ignore any red line he has drawn, as Mr. Obama did at great cost in Syria. But given the ideas Iran has floated so far, a deal would likely require Mr. Trump to cave. Why would he do that while the regime is afraid of its own people, badly weakened militarily by Israel, and under financial pressure? The main concession Iran is discussing is to suspend uranium enrichment for a time. But Iran isn't enriching now, thanks to U.S. bombers, and it isn't ready to resume. In exchange for that status quo, Tehran wants U.S. sanctions relief, which would be a lifeline to the regime and a betrayal of the protesters. Tehran is again talking up opportunities for U.S. investment, as if its state support for terrorism is a minor point that can be glossed over by Mr. Trump. Another gimmick is to leave future nuclear enrichment to a regional consortium conveniently located in Iran. This would give Iran control while spreading nuclear technology to new Middle East powers. Handing over its stockpile of enriched uranium from beneath the rubble is a necessary condition for any deal, but Iran's regime wants Russia to hold it. It also resists detailing and allowing verification of its past activities, which is a way to hide nuclear material. The fundamental error is thinking that the U.S. can stop the nuclear threat by reinforcing the regime's hold on power, which is said to be a problem for the Iranians alone. That's a cold view after the deaths of so many thousands in the streets, and it isn't even true. Iran's nuclear obstinacy is rooted in the nature of the regime. Aggressive and revolutionary from the start, Iran's regime has hardened into what the historian Ali M. Ansari calls an Islamic security state. Nuclear, missiles, massacres, and proxy militias are all fallout from its rule. They won't end until the regime does. The UAW's Southern Strategy. Its VW victory offers a big raise for workers, but new trouble for the firm. United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain is celebrating the union's new collective bargaining agreement at Volkswagen's plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, as he tries to build momentum to organize foreign automakers. The deal is a big win for the union, but it's a big gamble for workers. The UAW has sought to organize foreign-owned auto plants in the South for decades, with little success. But it notched a major victory 2 years ago in Chattanooga, despite workers there having previously rejected the union twice. Mr. Fain prevailed by advertising the rich contracts the UAW had recently reached with Detroit's Big Three car makers. VW had also agreed not to oppose the union, perhaps to curry favor with its Biden overlords doling out electric vehicle subsidies. Chattanooga workers this week will vote on what Mr. Fain calls a life-changing first agreement. There's no question the deal does look sweet in the short term. It includes a 20% wage increase over 4 years, a $4,000 ratification bonus, and $2,550 annual lump sum payments. The deal begins to close the gap with industry standards, the UAW says. This is an acknowledgement that the deal's wages and benefits fall short of what other auto workers receive. The top rate will rise to $34 an hour, which is less than the roughly $39 an hour that the highest paid General Motors and non-unionized Mercedes workers make. In late 2023, Hyundai said it would raise its top wage by 33% by 2028 to about $42 an hour. While the deal's bonuses and lump sum payments are sizable, they fall far short of the profit sharing that workers at Detroit's Big Three, Mercedes, and some other foreign auto plants receive. The Mercedes comparison is especially relevant since Mr. Fain is set on organizing its Alabama plant, where workers rejected the union in 2024. His goal is to talk up the VW agreement to cajole workers at Mercedes and other foreign plants into unionizing. But the biggest winner in Chattanooga is the union. VW agreed to pay 34 employees to work full-time as union representatives at the plant rather than on making vehicles. Workers will have to pay a minimum of 1.4% of their paycheck in dues. The UAW can use this money to fund its organizing campaigns and left-wing advocacy, including on college campuses. Academic workers, include graduate students, make up about a quarter of UAW's members. The UAW's college chapters helped spearhead anti-Israel protest. A big risk for Chattanooga workers is that the 250-page deal could make Volkswagen less efficient and competitive. The deal would let the union micromanage work at the plant. It gives the union a say in equipment and process design development, modification, and repurposing, and requires breaks at least every 2.5 hours. It also establishes a company-funded diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to ensure inclusive behaviors. The UAW has lost more than 1 million members since its heyday in the 1970s because its labor agreements made Detroit less competitive vis-a-vis foreign manufacturers. Some workers at the Chattanooga plant are seeking to decertify the union. Maybe they realize their jobs depend on VW's success, not Mr. Fain's. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the opinion pages, Democrats, you may already have lost the 2028 election. How can Kamala Harris be the frontrunner? Consider the alternatives: Newsom, Buttigieg, AOC, Shapiro. By Matthew Continetti. Stephen A. Smith had a confession to make. The 58-year-old ESPN personality is mulling a run for the Democratic presidential nomination. I'm giving strong consideration to being on that debate stage for 2027, he told CBS News Sunday Morning on February 15th. If Mr. Smith enters the race, he won't be alone. The 2028 Democratic primary is wide open, and the emerging field of candidates is lackluster. Every Democrat preparing to run has weaknesses. At this writing, only 2 potential candidates have double-digit support in the Real Clear Politics polling average. Both are vulnerable. Former Vice President Kamala Harris leads with 31%, followed by California Governor Gavin Newsom at 22%. From there, the drop-off is steep. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is in third place with 9%. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is close on Mr. Buttigieg's heel. The only other Democrat to earn more than 5% in national polls is Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. It's early, and the contest will attract upstarts, insurgents, and opportunists. Such outsiders have seized the moment in the past, sometimes successfully. Barack Obama in 2008, Donald Trump in 2016, sometimes not. Howard Dean in 2004, Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. No one knows who they will be. But they won't be conservative Democrats. There are hardly any left. Only 8% of Democrats call themselves conservative, according to Gallup. 59% consider themselves liberal or very liberal. A CNN poll last summer found that 1/3 of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents think of themselves as Democratic socialists like Miss Ocasio-Cortez. That share is 42% among those under 35. Socialism's rise raises troubling questions about the party's future. The shift has electoral consequences. A radicalized base, animated by anti-Trump resistance, may be an asset in special and midterm elections, but open borders, social disorder, and transgender ideology have hurt Democrats in presidential years. They will do so again if unchecked. Success in 2028 thus depends on finding an appealing candidate who embodies change not only from Mr. Trump, but also from the Democrats' reputation. That requires exactly the sort of self-examination Democrats are determined to avoid. The Democratic National Committee won't release its autopsy of the 2024 election, a telling refusal to debate the party's future. For the moment, an ascendant left celebrates presidential aspirants who oppose Mr. Trump's values and policies root and branch. What happens, though, when the moment passes and the public must decide between 2 non-Trump alternatives? Ms. Harris would again have to defend a Biden administration that voters repudiated after 4 years. She still hasn't said what she would have done differently from her former boss. Despite being a best-selling author, she is a master at not saying much at all. A recent rebranding of her campaign's social media handle into a Gen Z-led progressive content hub was especially cringe-worthy. So Kamala HQ is turning into headquarters, Miss Harris announced. And it's where you can go online to get basically the latest of what's going on, and also to meet and revisit with some of our great courageous leaders, be they elected leaders, community leaders, civic leaders, faith leaders, young leaders. Notice she didn't mention business leaders. Her fellow Californian, Mr. Newsom, is slick and glib and has perfected the art of anti-Trump trolling. But he's also spent 2 decades making the Golden State into a progressive petri dish of high taxes, stultifying regulations, and woke culture. Democrats who aren't enraptured by Mr. Newsom's Vogue magazine spread understand that his record may repel swing voters. Many California policies read as if they were reverse engineered from Republican attack ads. Write Mark Novikov and Jonathan Chait for The Atlantic in an article headlined, "Gavin Newsom's Record is a Problem." My American Enterprise Institute colleague, Rui Teixeira, is equally blunt. Gavin Newsom is no Bill Clinton. The 36-year-old Representative Ocasio-Cortez, now in her 4th term, attended this year's Munich Security Conference along with several other potential contenders. Her performance wasn't one for the ages. Asked to name the most important shift in Mr. Trump's foreign policy, Miss Ocasio-Cortez concocted a word salad that would have made Miss Harris proud. When pressed on whether the U.S. should defend Taiwan against an invasion from China, she dodged clumsily. I think that this is such a, I think that this is, of course, a very long-standing policy of the United States, she said. What we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. Got that? Other candidates' liabilities are easily discerned. Mr. Buttigieg is a former mayor who carries baggage from his days as transportation secretary. His ability to speak 7 languages dazzles affluent, white college-educated liberals. Minority voters are unimpressed. Mr. Shapiro is popular, well-spoken, and capable, but has yet to build a national coalition. There's also the uncomfortable question of whether a party whose activist base has grown unsympathetic to Israel would nominate an observant pro-Israel Jew. Governors Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and Andy Beshear of Kentucky are unexciting. Governor Wes Moore of Maryland hasn't been able to shed his reputation for fabulism. The list of possible contenders swells. When they look in the mirror, Senators Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego, Chris Murphy, Cory Booker, and Jon Ossoff all see presidents staring back. Remember the undercard debates from the 2016 Republican campaign? Democrats may be in for a rerun. Mock Stephen A. Smith all you like. He may never make it to the debate stage, but others with little or no political experience will surely be tempted. And in today's media environment, what begins on the fringe often turns into the main event. Mr. Continetti is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal Opinions Free Expression. The interest rates compared to last week and now. A money market annual yield is 0.41%, the same. A 5-year CD annual yield 1.69%, the same. A 30-year fixed mortgage was 6.22%, now 6.14%. A 15-year fixed mortgage was 5.66%, now 5.60%. A jumbo mortgage was 6.37%, now 6.41%. A 5-year adjustable mortgage was 5.82%, now 5.85%. A new car loan, 48 months, was 6.95%, now 6.96%. Letters to the editor. Topic: Congress is like a teenager on a shopping spree. Regarding Kimberly A. Strassel's Vaught Bends the Curve, the debt and deficit show that Congress has acted more like a teenager with a parent's credit card than the world's greatest deliberative body. Congressional spending blowouts do more harm than good, in part because federal taxpayer dollars often end up befitting political parties and candidates through opaque non-governmental organizations and special interest. New topic: a hard knock life, not for the middle class. Jordan McGinnis writes in Why the Middle Class Feels Poor that middle class families feel they're losing ever more ground to the upper middle class. The median family earning $130,000 compared with the 80th percentile family is missing out on what exactly? Fancier vacations? 2-star Michelin dinners? In a typical city outside of New York and Los Angeles, an income of $130,000 ought to be comfortable. To my mind, social media is the problem, enticing everyone to covet conspicuous consumption. From Ari Weitzner. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 18th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day or night, and enjoy the weekend.